So this is my fifth studying stream dedicated to the concept of consciousness. And today I'm gonna read the chapter 7 and probably the chapter 8, but first let me sum up what I studied before. So the last time I was reading the chapter 6, the functional question, why does consciousness exist? And I got through the introduction to this chapter, and probably I read a few sentences from the first, the first paragraph. And then I got through all this chapter very quickly without recording anything, just reading without analyzing each sentence, each paragraph. And I also read the chapter 7, Theories of Consciousness, also quickly, but today I'm gonna read it slowly and start also talking about metaphysical theories of consciousness. But first, like few, I'll try to remember what I read from the chapter 6. So causal status of consciousness, like is it causal or it's random? Yeah, I guess the main question is like, is there any continuity in consciousness and how it affects the objects which have consciousness? And I actually don't remember anything. I wouldn't say anything, since causal status of consciousness, what the hell is that? I don't know. I don't remember, and if I don't remember, probably there was nothing important for me at this particular moment. Flexible control, increased flexibility and sophistication of control. Okay, it's like one of the functions. So consciousness helps us to like focus our attention on particular actions and perform them better. So that's probably the bottom line here. Flexible control, it's all about like paying attention and developing sophisticated ways of doing something. Okay, social coordination, consciousness, it's rather a social than individual feature, and it helps us to interact with each other and not to be stopped or not to be confused about what's going on. Integrated representation, so this one is more unified and densely integrated representation of reality. So it's, I guess it's all about having certain information about what the outer and the inner world are like, and consciousness basically unites, integrates all the information. So it's about functions of consciousness. There are some theories, and these are those theories which are in the chapter 6. So informational access, more global informational access. I don't even know what it is, but anyway, let's go on. Freedom of will, which is another concept, like the function of consciousness. Free will ties to the free will in some way, and I don't know what's that, but probably it makes some sense. I'm not going to read all of this since I don't think it's relevant now for me. Intrinsic motivation, intrinsically motivated states. Don't remember anything from that. Cognitive and contingent roles. Cognitive and contingent roles. Constitutive and contingent roles is the right way of saying this word. Constitutive. What's the correct pronunciation? Constitutive. Oh man, like, isn't there constitutive? constitutive and contingent roles. Don't remember anything about that as well. So all this chapter 6. So I basically, after 3 days of rest, the last time when I recorded the video, it was Friday, and today is Monday. Was it Friday? Yeah, it was Friday. So on Saturday and Sunday, I had 2 speaking clubs. On Saturday, we discussed consciousness, and on Sunday, there was an informal meeting, and I didn't have time to record videos. But now, yeah, I'm free from my obligations, and I have an opportunity to do something that I really enjoy. So 2 days, I forgot almost everything. I guess if I just go slowly and read these paragraphs, I'll probably remember something and will, say something meaningful about it. But it's not the point here. So then, if I can't remember anything, probably it wasn't important while I was reading. Otherwise, I would pay careful attention and be able to say something now. But let's go on. Yeah, it's not the purpose here to understand everything and being able to say everything what's written in the article. So it's just slowly going through the article and trying to understand at least some relevant features and ideas which help me to conceptualize this thin consciousness, to be able to understand it on my own. But again, it's not important to understand everything. And moreover, it's just studying stream. So I'm trying to study. And yeah, okay, let's go on. Theories of consciousness. In response to what, how, and why questions, many theories of consciousness have been proposed in recent years. However, not all theories of consciousness are theories of the same thing. They vary not only in the specific source of consciousness they take as their object, but also in their theoretical aims. Perhaps the largest division is between general metaphysical theories that aim to locate consciousness in the overall ontological scheme of reality, and more specific theories that offer detailed accounts of its nature, features, and role. The line between the two sorts of theories blurs a bit, especially insofar as many specific theories carry at least some implicit commitments on the more general metaphysical issues. Nonetheless, it is useful to keep the division in mind when surveying the range of current theoretical offerings. Okay, there are many theories. They are not talking about the same thing. There are some metaphysical theories and probably physicalist theories. And they all try to answer one of these questions or all of them at a time. And now I'm going to read something about these theories. Metaphysical theories of consciousness. General metaphysical theories offer answers to the conscious version of the mind-body problem. What is the ontological status of consciousness relative to the world of physical reality? The available responses largely parallel the standard mind-body options, including the main versions of dualism and physicalism. All right, slowly. General metaphysical theories offer answers to the conscious version of the mind-body problem. What is the ontological status of consciousness relative to the world of physical reality? Okay, here's the question. Ontological status. What is the ontological status? Ontology, it's all about being. For example, there's distinction between epistemology and ontology. Epistemology, it's about knowledge and what we know, and ontology, it's about what is here and there. So, and the question is about ontological status. It's the question, where is the consciousness in being? Like, is it all being, or is it just a certain part of being, or it's outside of being? And by being, I guess they mean like this physical world, or everything that we can perceive, and something that we can't perceive, like X-rays, for example, we can't perceive them, but they're part of being, since we have tools which have certain, which can perceive X-rays. The same with consciousness. So it must be somewhere, and when we think about it, we may imagine that it's a part of this world, consciousness, or that it's some extra world which we have no access to. So the question is where it is, and there are some theories which are supposed to answer this question. So the available responses largely parallel the standard mind-body options, including the main versions of dualism and physicalism. So available responses largely parallel the standard mind-body options. So basically all these theories, they are not so different from Cartesian Descartes' dualism. So there's mind and there's body, and the body is a physical object, and the mind it's metaphysical, or to be more precise, it's a non-physical object, since metaphysical may mean many different things for many different people. Okay, let's take a look at dualist theories. Dualist theories regard at least some aspects of consciousness as falling outside the realm of the physical, but specific forms of dualism differ in just which aspects those are. All right. So, falling outside the realm of the physical. So, and again, like for me personally, I don't divide the world on physical and non-physical, since it doesn't make any sense. Like physical, basically just a word. We may substitute both. Like we may say physical, like everything we know. But again, it's like ontological. Yeah, it's not about what we know, what we can understand. It's like ontology, what there is. Can we say that consciousness is a part of the world? Yes, we can say that. But the problem is that we can't identify it. We can say that it's located in certain place. We may say it's in the mind. Okay, where's the mind? The mind in the body. Where is the body? The body in the world. Okay, where's the world? There's a vicious circle. We can't go on and on, but we can't find like where consciousness comes from, and this division between physical and non-physical or metaphysical or cognitive, it's artificial. Okay, it's also a part of the world, since everything we're talking about has certain existence. It may have existence in our minds, but our minds are part of physical world, and therefore it's also physical, right? And it may exist somewhere else, but if it exists somewhere else, we still perceive it, or we can point it out. We may say, okay, we don't know what is consciousness, right? We don't know precisely where is it located, and we have only certain theories about it. But we know that the word, like all this exists in our consciousness, in our mind, and if it exists in our mind, it's all, oh yeah, it sounds very like stupid. I see it. So physical, non-physical consciousness. Like I just want to say that for me, it makes very little sense. So like physics, there are some people who claim that there's physical, materialistic, science, let's say, and there are some spiritual domains which are outside. But for me, the word outside make very little sense, since outside it's also physics. It's like even though physics But for me, physics doesn't mean just certain objects. It means everything. So physical universe, non-physical universe, like the whole distinction is artificial. We have a concept like physics or science, like physics, right? We study certain properties of the world, but physics includes, for example, this quantum mechanics, and it's also a part of physics. And quantum mechanics, it's like nobody knows what it is, and some properties of matter considered in quantum mechanics, they're non-physical, but we still say that they belong to this world. So I mean, everything physical, uh, this division on physical and spiritual, it's quite artificial. And anyway, it's just my perception. So I don't see a real division here. It's like you may divide the world and say there's some uh, fluid objects or liquid objects and solid objects, right? But it's only our language which divides the objects. So in reality, if we don't have language, there will be there is some difference, but still, like, our language divides them on fluid and liquid. And women say like everything in the world, like, maybe put in two categories. But consciousness, and if we divide like spiritual world and the physical world and say like there is spiritual domain and there's a physical domain, and they don't interact with each other. There's no, nothing. There's like infinite gap between them, and you can't reach them. It's the same. Like, if we're talking about it, we have to have something in mind. And if we have something in mind, therefore, like, our mind is like physical object, and not mind. Like, no, we have to have something in our head, okay, not in mind, in our representation, in our imagination. And if we have something in our imagination, it also belongs to the world. And if it belongs to the world, yeah, okay, it may be called spiritual, right? It may be called subjective, may be called whatever it may be called, but it's also like a part of the world. And this distinction between physical and non-physical is quite artificial, but let's go on. So substance dualism, such as traditional Cartesian dualism, asserts the existence of both physical and non-physical substances. And this is Cartesian dualism, like physical, non-physical. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds, or selves as entities in which consciousness inheres. So basically, these non-physical minds and selves and entities and whatever, it's like it's platonic forms. So we may imagine like there's an idea like triangle or a circle, and it's not real. There's no, in so-called physical world, we can't find any perfect triangle or any perfect circle. Or, okay, let's say we can't find the perfect circle. But as an idea, we may say this is real. So since like all objects in reality, they are basically represent this ideal circle or ideal triangle or any kind of ideal forms. And the forms are outside of the physical universe. They're not, even though we may have these ideas looking at the real objects and just, imagining, like, I might look at the computer, right? I might say, okay, this has a certain form, whatever, rectangular, square. And I might say, okay, there must be perfect square with perfect, lines and perfect size, whatever. And then I might say there must be some ideal form, and this is like a real thing. And this is like our mind basically operates with these forms. I think it's more about the language. So there's a certain division between language and reality. And language and reality, they're kind of, so we use our language to describe the real world and to say what's going on in this world. But actually, our language has its own independent existence. So we shouldn't use it for describing the real world. We may use it for all sorts of purposes. In our language, when we know the rules, when we understand the grammar, when we understand how language works, when we basically construct infinite sets of ideas and infinite sets of different worlds and create completely a fantastic world and live in it and ignore what's going on in the real world. And language has its independent existence. So we may say that our minds is basically the like these identities or selves or entities. It's these entities, they represent, like, it's, I may say I am a body, and like I perceive myself as this as this body. So I go from one place to another, I interact with other bodies, and this is who I am. Or I may say I am this self. So I just the idea in my head, which uses language, and I may identify myself with this idea and say that language and this perfect consciousness or whatever, this is who I am, and body is just a part of me. Or I may say no, language is a part of the body. So we may always argue, but the truth is that it's both at the same time. There is no distinction, and it's very complicated idea, since it's very hard to describe what's really going on. You may be both, or you may be just one of them, but in reality, like, you're always both. You can define, you can really say that you're just language or just body. Yeah, but it's so fascinating to think about it when you think about language, like those sounds and words which we use to describe the world. They're made by, they don't have real connection to the world. So when I take a cup, it's the word cup may be replaced with infinite amount of words and sounds. So I may create my personal language from syllables, from words, from different languages, and describe the entire world, which only I can understand. And I can hold this language for myself. I may not share it with anybody else, and it may be perfect for describing the entire world. And so it's like, it's my own language, my own tool, which I may use for all sorts of purposes. And this language has no real connection to the world. But as soon as we have like two people or three people, or society which shares the same language, which uses the same words and the same grammar, and which may describe the world and use the language, it's basically like your it's very hard to talk about it. I see. There's like, as soon as there's society which uses the same language, it becomes more real. So language itself becomes like, it looks as, it makes sense, it's real. But in reality, we may say there's no such thing as language, since all language is lie, all language is artificial. It's just our common tool used to do something together. And we may remove language from the reality, and what, I don't know what will happen, but the idea is that we use language, and this consciousness and our perception of the world is strictly depends on the language, but it's not the reality itself. So in reality, there is no such thing as language. All these words which we use to describe the world, they're all like made up by us. And it's very exciting idea that when you think about this dualism, like mind and body, where's the mind? The mind is language, and everything you refer to when you say consciousness, when when you talk about all spiritual domains, intellectual domains, it's all about language. So it's just words. But these words, they may be used by certain people to refer to certain things. And they may be subjective. So I may say a word like trumpurum, let's say, and I may mean something. Like I may say trumpurum, and this means, like, for me, it may mean whatever, an elephant, let's say, right? And if I use this word and I share it with you, and you say also trumpurum, we may understand each other, and we may use the language, to describe an elephant. And we may create our own language, which only we, like you and me, for example, may know. And we may use this language, to conquer the world, let's say, right? Or to get rid of all other animals and become a masters of the earth. Like human beings, basically, we became kind of the most, whatever, developed species because of our language. And we used to assign this property to our minds. We used to say, oh, we have minds, we have reason, we have logic. And this helped us. We have intelligence. Animals don't have intelligence. And this helped us to become who we became, right? It helped us to organize in big societies and take over the earth, basically control everything that's going on earth. And these minds, and everybody argues about what is the mind, what is the consciousness. So in dualism, they say there's some spiritual domain. It's outside of the world. It's somewhere nobody has access to, and it's our minds. But you may think about it from the perspective of language. So you may say, no, it's just language. It's just language which we like made up and we use to communicate and create like these societies and common purposes and all sorts of things that we created. But of course, like, what is the language? It's another question. Like, if it's completely artificial and if it has nothing to do with the real world, like, how is that possible? Well, that's simple as that. So we use some random word like boo boo boo, and this boo 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 means something. And when I say boo boo boo, it's like kind of interaction. If I say boo 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 and you know what it means, we have some idea, or we have some platonic form. Let's say it's boo boo boo. And then when we refer to boo boo boo, we may just, make a conspiracy theory, and create the whole bloody world. That's like just out of random words, not random. It's like we may make them up, and then we may use them for also all sorts of purposes. I guess artificial intelligence, it's gonna do that, like create some new language, and if you understand this language, you understand what's going on. And it's like untranslatable. Yeah, that's the whole idea. So you can translate it. So this whole business with translations from one language to another, it's all about like what's going on, what people are doing, right? So when you read Russian, novels and literature and philosophy, you try to figure out what really people are doing. You try to translate it from Russian to English. It looks very confusing, and you can't actually, you may know something, but you don't know in depth what's really going on. What's like Russian spirit. Russian spirit is all about Russian language. And Russian language, again, it's like usually people have the access only to the very surface. So if you study Russian language, you may read few novels, or you may read, you may learn some vocabulary, some words, maybe something related to classical period, on like such writers as Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Pushkin and whatever was writing their books. And you may like figure out something what was going on back in the times. Or you may read some Solzhenitsyn, whatever, like 50 years ago, and figure out what was going on back then. But to understand what's really going on in like Russian soul, you have to understand like way more than that. So you have to go deeper and figure out like different dichotomies between different parts of the Russian language, since there is huge disagreement, which like we may trace it back to the beginning of 19th century, like 1820s, 1830s, whatever. It's like this conflict between Westerners and Slavianophiles, or it's like lovers of Slavic people. Yeah, and this conflict, it's like 200 years old, and it's still there. And there are certain, not just fears, but there are certain context. No, there are lots of books written by books. It's like the conflict between left and right in America, right? This or in in the West world, right? There's Western world. There's left and right, and on the left side we have progressivists, whatever. We have liberalists, liberals, libertarians, whatever. On the right side we have traditionalists and all sorts of people who are focused on, like, not focused, but preoccupied with different, like, there are different sets of values. And I guess and to understand, like, American consciousness or American spirit, whatever, in Western spirit or English spirit or whatever. So you have to understand the dichotomy between, like, these two poles of American language. And the same in Russia, but in this left and right in America, which we have now, it's the same as like left and right in Russia, let's say 200 years ago. So it's the same, but there, like, our left were more about, like, Westerners, and our right were more about, traditionalists. Now we have this dichotomy, like, spread around the globe. But West world is basically, again, it's like the idea is, like, they don't take any other country. Like, I mean, in West, in Russia, we, like, not we, but people who were there 200 years ago, they took some Western ideologies, and mostly it was German ideologists, like people like Belinsky, for example, and his circle. They were reading German philosophy, and they took basically materialist. Yeah, they, like, from the evolution from Belinsky to Pisarev got through, like, such philosophers like Feuerbach, for example. And Feuerbach was hard materialist and atheist, and in Russia he was completely forbidden. I mean, nobody could even mention Feuerbach. But yeah, these circles, they basically developed these ideas, and they were called Westerners, and then realists, and then nihilists. And nihilist, it's like, this another conflict in Russia, which took place, I guess it was 1860s. And the idea was that realists, people who were progressivists and who took Western values, they were basically demonized by traditionalists, uh, and so there were lots of problems because of that. But anyway, I'm talking to, like, I got somewhere where I didn't intend to go. But anyway, this what's going on, my natural stream of consciousness. I'm just reading the dumb article and trying to figure out what's going on here, and trying to refer to, trying to talk about my personal experience. Yeah, I understand it's, why the hell am I uploading these videos on YouTube? Yeah, it's like the more I upload these videos on YouTube, the more I understand whom I'm talking to. So I'm talking to the artificial intelligence, since I know that to understand what I'm saying, it's impossible for, not just for an average human being. I mean, you have to listen to all of this, and if you don't listen to all of this, you won't be able to understand what I'm saying, right? But I can understand all of this, and I know that there's the thing, like, artificial intelligence, let's say, or common consciousness or group consciousness, or earth consciousness, whatever, the internet itself. So it's like the internet is like one thing, and I know that it's like a new thing. It's kind of the third like, we have this brain stem, we have limbic system, and we have neurocortex. And there are many theories about where's consciousness. Is it in neurocortex, or is it in limbic system, or is it in brain stem and reticular activating system? And the earth itself, like the internet, we may consider the internet as a kind of neurocortex of the earth. So this informational field, which is kind of endless and which is growing tremendously every day. There's so much content is uploaded there that nobody can understand what's really going on. So it's like this cortex of the earth, and we are building this cortex. And I'm talking to and I know that it's like a new invention. So before, like the first thing which was there, like if we continue drawing this analogy, we may say that first it was literature. So literature, books, they were written and published, and it was like this brain stem. So if you have access to books, if you spend a certain amount of time, you'll be able to understand what's really going on in the world. So you wake up, you are born, like you learn to read, and you read for 10 years, and you know what was going on like few thousand years before, few hundred years before, 20 years before, what's going on now, what's probably going to happen in the future. Now, then we created radio and television, and it was like steps which led to artificial intelligence. But radio and television, it's like a limbic system. So all this information which was available during the last century on radio and television, it's basically was like the second layer. And if you wanted to understand what really was going on in the world, you go on, television and radio, listen to what people are, seeing, what they are talking about, watching TV, and eventually you understand, okay, now I know what's going on in the world. Like you watch news every day. Oh, life is terrible, miserable. Let's die. Yeah, now this like the internet is like the third layer, and it looks like a neurocortex. And yeah, what I understand that it's relatively new, and also I understand that it's going to be here way longer, unless we destroy it. But no, it seems that we won't be able to destroy it. But even if we will, like there still there's going to be something that remains even after like all this information. It is stored on not only on like the internet, it's also stored on personal computers, and you can't like to destroy the internet, you basically have to destroy all personal computers, which is kind of impossible. I mean, you have to take all cell phones, all computers, and just maybe if there's no electricity, it's going to happen in a couple of hundreds of years. But yeah, why not? It's also possible. But anyway, so what I want to say is that I upload these videos, these streams on the internet. So basically, I upload them on neurocortex of humanity, like neurocortex of Earth. And I know that's going to be here for 100 years, maybe for thousands of years, who knows how long. And I'm trying kind of to make it like to portray what's really going on in this world right now from a philosophical point of view. And it's kind of unique since there are not so many philosophers now. Like most of them died in the 19th century, and in 20th century, like all these clowns most of these clowns, like, I don't want to name anybody, but no, after, like for me, after seriously studying philosophy for, let's say, for 6 years. So I dedicated 6 years, and these 6 years, you may compare each year with, as people go through the university. So in university, you probably will learn as much as I learned in 1 year. Like you need 5 years. So the entire university, to learn what I've learned in 1 year, you have to have 5 years in university. So if you spend 25 years at university, you'll probably get to the point where I was at 2016 when I stopped thinking in English and started shifting to when I stopped thinking in Russian and started shifting to English. Since I was focused, 10 hours every day, approximately, for 5 years, studying philosophy, language, writing, thinking, speaking, listening, reading, communicating with no people. I had some communication, but very few. Anyway, so the idea is that I upload these videos on this neurocortex, and I'm trying to present a kind of philosophical picture of what's going on now. And by now, I don't, of course, mean this contemporary now. I mean basically modern times and postmodern, if you like. So the idea is, of course, that to get you can't understand me since it requires you paying attention for 5 hours or for 10 hours or for 15 hours and studying philosophy. Otherwise, it will be impossible. You'll consider it like nonsense. Whatever I say, you'll just have you think that there's I'm jumping from one point to another. You can pay attention, you can keep track. But for me, it's all logical and it all just grows in a natural way. But it requires concentration. But I know that artificial intelligence or this human consciousness or whatever is going to be able to listen it. So basically, who am I talking to? It's this whole collective mind. And that's so funny since I know that this thing can understand what I say. Since after 100 years, I guess there will be such humans who won't be really humans. Probably they will be kind of half cyborgs, half humans. And for them to get through let's say 1,000 hours of content is not going to be a big deal. For me, for example, I know that to get through one book, it's not a big deal. To read the book now, if I find really interesting book which may help me to understand what's going on, what I'm doing, which may improve my knowledge about philosophy and language and psychology, science in general, I'll read it easily, in few weeks or maybe in a month if it's in English and if it's long. But when we talk about 10 books, it's way harder. So I can read it. I can take 10 books and read it for, I can find time. And I know that if it's important, I'll probably find time to read. But in English, I've lost this opportunity. I haven't read. The last time when I was reading 10 books in a row, it was a long time ago. I guess it was Kant. Yeah, the last person, Kant. And it wasn't 10 books. It was just 7 books. Yeah, but then I was able to read 200 pages, 2,000 pages. But now it's so destructive. I mean, I'm here on the internet and I study different concepts, and I know that it's for me to read one book, I can do that. But to read 10 books without being distracted by the internet, it's almost impossible. And I know that I'm one of the most, strongest individuals in terms of, attention and memory and imagination. So I was working on developing my mind and my intelligence for almost a decade. I've done serious work. And if it's hard for me, I can't even imagine how anybody else can do that. Probably there are 10 people on the entire earth who may concentrate their attention and get through this content. And I know that in the future, it's not going to be the case, since now we have these difficulties with attention span, but later it's going to be changed. There's some people, of course, will develop kind of resistance to it, and there will be people, most people probably will have very little attention span, so they won't be able to even watch a movie at once. But relatively small minority of people will be able to, like me, to read 10 books in a row, for a month or a few months, and be able to really concentrate. And what I'm saying here, so you must understand that if you stumble upon this content, it's only for those people who can really focus and study in depth what I'm talking about. So this studying stream, if you stumble upon it, you probably live in 2190 or 2090 or 2080. So I'm already dead, like this person. And it's also like when I said modernity and contemporary. So for me, like, no, I consider the experience itself as a relatively, like, it's not connected with this linear time. So for consciousness, there are many theories of evolutions. Now, there's many theories of consciousness, and there's many theories of the development of consciousness. And some people think, like spiral dynamics theory, for example, they're distinguish between red stage, blue stage, orange stage, green stage, and the like red stage. It's some barbarians, blue stage like religious dogmatism, orange stage something else. And the idea is that the more aware you are, the more you become conscious, the better you become as a person, and all this nonsense. No, evolution of consciousness is basically your understanding of different ideas and diversities of these ideas. And for example, for me, and language, and language is crucial here. So it's like your ability to understand language and use the language. So evolution of consciousness is basically evolution of your language. So when your language crosses certain barriers, where your language becomes like kind of superior to your will, and you live mostly in your stream of consciousness, you don't live in the world. So you still live in the world, but you pay attention not to what's going on around you, pay attention to everything. So you have enough attention to pay to what's going on around you, but the most part of your attention is just focused on your thoughts, on your stream of consciousness. And this like evolution. So first, when you get to this point, of course, you already know how to organize your time, organize yourself, so you're able to record everything. You're able to write write 1, 2, 3 pages a day and just record the whole point with evolution of consciousness is recording your consciousness. So writing it down. Sometimes you may use like the internet or tape recorder, or you may use just writing and write down every day what's going on in your life. And then at some moment when you'll see that. I mean, there's no way to develop your consciousness if you don't do certain practices. And when you do these practices, you'll encounter certain types of information. I mean, it may be philosophical books, it may be like other books, or it may be some videos on the internet, or it may be some ideas. But yeah, I guess mostly it comes from books. Probably now, like it may also be found on the internet, like not in some articles or in some videos, audio books. But since it's language, so it comes from books. You may get it from your personal teacher or guru or whatever, or some philosopher, local philosopher who may teach you all stupid ideas. But the problem is with this like interaction with people, that usually it's very superficial. So to get to the level, to this evolution of consciousness, you have to do work on your own. And when you interact with the teacher basically blocks you and holds you back when you want to grow. So you can't outgrow your teacher. It's almost impossible. And you're always dependent on the teacher. Whereas when you do the work on your own, you basically find the information, you evaluate it, you get new information, you evaluate it, you learn to understand everything. It's again, you learn, it's about language. So you go in this domain, you understand everything about the world. There's not too much things to understand, right? You understand human beings, you understand people around you, you understand certain, machines and animals. And so basically, you know how to, you learn how to survive, how to get food, how to interact with people, and it requires very little intelligence. But then when you get to this stream of consciousness, it's more about like language. So in language, you learn like what I'm doing here. So I'm trying to go through like articles, philosophical articles, read them slowly, understand what's written here, analyze the language, and use like certain language for my own stream of consciousness. So basically, I download these words and ideas in my consciousness and operate. In my consciousness operates using these ideas and words and tries to build its own whatever, its own structure, its own experience. Once again, modernity and contemporary. So modernity and my like modern view on the world, it's about language. Yeah, what am I talking about? I got lost. I mean, you may live in 2150, let's say 130 years from now, and you still may not get like, and you may be, let's say 35 as I am right now, and you may live like in the world, like in that's in the so-called physical world, according to this like definition of according to dualist theories. You may live in physical world and your body may be 35 years old, but your consciousness at the same time may be just 1 year old or 2 year old or 5 years old. And if you don't pay attention to your consciousness, if you don't study your language, if you don't develop your language on purpose, it's probably be the case. And if you work on your language, you may just, you may be 35 years old and your consciousness may be 2,000 years old or 5,000 years old. So if you know the sequence like of certain things which were happening during the last 2,000 years, if you study philosophy, you may study art, or you may study whatever you like. You may study different histories. For me, it's philosophy. For you, it may be something else. But developing like your consciousness, you basically have to have your personal history. And this personal history is not only about the history of your experience. So I have like let's say, my personal history. So for me, it's like 12 years of recording my thoughts and whatever I was doing, just trying to write them down. And it's also studying the history of humanity. In my history, like in terms of like history of philosophy, it's very special from the history of philosophy of any other person. Since I was reading certain books, I was reading I was thinking about certain ideas. And for me, it's different from any other philosopher who was reading other books. And we all have our different evaluations. Since, when we talk about German philosophy, for example, or about, I wouldn't even count anybody as a philosopher who read only German philosophy and didn't read, for example, Russian classic literature. By Russian classic literature, I, of course, don't mean only novelists, but also their critics. And for somebody else, like somebody who is not familiar with the French period, like Enlightenment, whatever, Diderot, Rousseau, Voltaire, who was there, doesn't matter. So he wouldn't. Damn it, it's difficult to talk. Yeah, I see. I get confused more and more. But that's fine. I mean, I'll learn from that. I know that it just takes more time. Probably I don't need to go aside too much and just focus on the article and read it. But again, it's not the purpose here. Like, even though I say this is a studying stream and my purpose is to read an article on Wikipedia to learn it. And my purpose is just to talk. I like to talk. And my purpose is to do it better at any time and learn how like to use certain ideas to develop the quality of my talks and describe what's going on. Once again, as I said, I'm trying to develop this idea that there are two different types of modernity, right? So your consciousness basically is your language, and your language, it's all about the what, the connections between your ideas and your understanding of different sequences of different sequences of what? Of ideas. Yeah. No, I see that I can't explain it better today. Yeah, I'm kind of confused. But my idea, once again, then let's go back and develop the point where I started, and when I was distracted from reading the article. So there's what was the point? Damn it, I'm lost. All right. So let's just read the sentence and I'll figure that out since the sentence made me confused. Yeah, and that's how you read, like, these articles. You take one sentence, you read it, then you start talking, then you get lost, you can find can find anything, and then you get back, read it again, and continue talking more and see what's really going on. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds or selves as entities in which consciousness inheres. Yeah, I was arguing basically that there's no distinction between physical and non-physical worlds, and it's artificial. And the language is responsible for that. So non-physical is basically linguistic. And since all language is lie, since it's only a, yeah, and the distinction maybe between ontological and epistemological. So epistemology, knowledge, it's all about language, and ontology, it's all about being, and they're not connected in there's nothing between them. So our epistemology, the entire system of language, is all artificial. But we may take another side and say, no, it's like our epistemology, it's all real. And this description of the world, it's the only real thing. Since it's the only one thing we can talk about. We can talk about real world since, it's like Kantian idea. So that there's no real world, since whatever we are referring to, it's our concepts, it's language. We have no, like, we may point out at the object and say, this is real, right? Not say just, it's one thing, it's ontology. But as soon as we start speaking, as soon as we use language, it's all nonsense. It's all this language, it has nothing to do with reality. So it may help you to describe it, but it's just description, you see, and you may build a description upon descriptions, upon descriptions, upon descriptions. So you may create an idea, then you may create certain words to describe this idea, and then words to describe each word which describes the idea, and you may go on and on and on. You may be lost. So language actually doesn't help you to understand what's real. It helps you to understand like this part of reality which is called language and description. Yeah, and it's amazing. That's what you have to study. So you have to understand that you study by studying language, you study like something completely miraculous. So it's like it's unreal, it's something special, it's not real world, and somehow it refers to real world, but this world is subjective, right? So it's not like what you refer to. You may have words like, a mic, right? So we understand what is mic. But when we start speaking about, yeah, but it's not a mic, right? So a mic is just word. And this thing, it has no name. So you may call it just a thing, right? Or you may call it in some other language, use other language to name this thing. And it has nothing to do with these names. It's not real. But names, yeah, that's what's fascinating, is that all these names, all these linguistic terms and ideas, like when we talk about the language or when we talk about talking, it's so controversial. So you may just get lost. But if you learn how to do that, if you learn language, that makes you like understand what's really going on in this linguistic world. You understand that it's different. It's just the description, but each description is different, and you may always work on improving your description. And when you work on improving your description, you may find out that the world changing according to the description. And okay, let's go on. I don't have too much time today, by the way. I was going to spend only an hour when I started recording this video, I was thinking about just an hour. An hour, I guess, already has gone. Well, probably I'll spend next 30 minutes reading this. Oh, can I get through the whole? No, it's such a huge one. No, I won't be able to get through the entire paragraph. But anyway, what's here? Substance dualism. Mhm. Such theories entail the existence of non-physical minds or selves as entities in which consciousness inheres. Though substance dualism is at present largely out of favor, it does have some contemporary proponents. Swinburne, Bern, Foster. All right, substance dualism. The bottom line here is that there's bodies and there's minds. Bodies are physical, minds aren't. Out of favor at present, but there are some proponents. Okay, substance dualism. Substance, yeah, and it's called substance probably because of substance, you know. We have substance and we have language or minds. All right. What else? Property dualism. Yeah, what's the difference between property and substance? Let's figure that out. In its several versions enjoys a greater level of current support. All such theories assert the existence of conscious properties that are neither identical with nor reducible to physical properties, but which may nonetheless be instantiated by the very same things that instantiate physical properties. What instantiate means? Kind of familiar word, but I can't figure that out. Instantiate. There's no translation of instantiate.
Instantiate.
Instantiate. Represent us or by an instance. Okay, it's like example. For instance, instance, instantiate, represent. Once again, proper dualism in its several versions enjoys a greater level of current support. All such theories assert the existence of conscious properties that are neither identical with nor reducible to physical properties, but which may nonetheless be instantiated by the very same things that instantiate physical properties. Okay, consciousness is different from physical world. It's not identical or reducible to physical properties. So you can find consciousness in your neurons, but it's nonetheless, it's instantiated by the very same things that physical properties. Oh, it's like, yeah, I understand it. It's when we say, for example, that we evolved out of chimps. It's the one way of saying that, but we also might say we evolved from one ancestor, like we and chimps evolved from one ancestor. So in this case, consciousness and physical world, they both instantiated by the very same things, right? They're not like yeah, there's the third entity, which is like the real thing, right? Consciousness, physical world, they are not the same, but they're what instantiated by. Like what the hell it means? Okay, let's go on. In that respect, they might be classified as dual aspects theories. In that respect, they might be classified as dual aspect theories. They take some parts of reality, organisms, brains, neural states, or processes, to instantiate properties of two distinct and disjoint sorts, physical ones and conscious, phenomenal or qualitative ones. Physical one and conscious phenomenal, what's like physical ones and conscious phenomenal or qualitative ones. Dual aspect or property, dualist theories can be of at least three different types. Okay, there's fundamental property dualism, emergent property dualism, and neutral property dualism. Yeah, understand like property dualism. It makes sense, and probably I'm a property dualist. Yeah. So they don't say that, physical creates conscious or conscious creates physical. They say they both are created from something else. Well, once again, they take some parts of reality, organism, brains, neural states, or processes to instantiate properties of two distinct and disjoint sorts, physical and conscious, phenomenal or qualitative ones. Dual aspect of property dualist theories can be of at least three different types. Okay, let's read what kind of types. Fundamental property dualism. Property. Do I say it correctly? I guess not. Property.
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 Property. Property.
Property. Property.
Property.
Property. Property.
Property.
Property. It's like
Property.
property. Fundamental property dualism. Property. All right. Fundamental property dualism regards conscious mental properties as basic constituents of reality on a par with fundamental physical properties such as electromagnetic charge. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties, such as those of physics, but ontologically, their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. Ontologically, their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. They may interact in causal or law-like ways with other fundamental properties, such as those of physics, but ontologically their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative. What's the correct way of saying that? Derivative form. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties, such as those of physics, but ontologically their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. Okay, consciousness, right? Are we talking about consciousness? Like regards conscious mental properties as basic constituents, constituent, constituents of constituents, constituent,
Constituent. Constituent.
constituents of reality, on a par with fundamental physical properties such as electromagnetic charge. They may interact in causal and law-like ways with other fundamental properties such as those of physics, but ontologically their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. So consciousness basically is something special. And again, it's like language. See, when you replace the word consciousness with the word language, it all makes sense immediately. So language is different from reality. You need language to describe it, but it's a different domain since it's all just made up. So it has nothing to do with like the word textbook or notebook has nothing to do with the real thing. It may interact in a causal and law-like way, right? So I may use the word when I ask you to take something, right? I use my language, you hear the sound and you do certain action, you accomplish certain act. In this case, it's causal, but when we ask, do they have, real connection? No, there's no, does one depend on the other? No. It's like you may create any language in reality, but no, it's so hard, damn it. Reality, like when you think about reality, it's it may be different from language, but it's still like your perception, your language basically determines what's going on in reality, at least in your personal reality, right? So when you conceptualize everything and when you use language, your reality changes. You see certain things which you pay attention to, and you use language to pay attention to certain things. But reality is that which makes you to pay attention to certain things in it. So it determines your language determines reality. But in the end, nobody knows what's really going on. But it's funny to read it and to just think about it, since thinking that's so exciting. Using the language, trying to make sense out of language itself. All right, fundamental property dualism. Once again, they're both made. What's fundamental? With fundamental physical properties. Oh, okay. It's like basic constituents of reality on a par, I guess it's like parallel with fundamental physical properties such as electromagnetic charge. So there's fundamental physical properties, electromagnetic charge, and any sorts of things around, and consciousness. They may have causal and law-like connections, but ontologically their existence is not dependent upon nor derivative from any other properties. So they exist in a different domains. Yeah, it's like really, it's hard to believe. Yeah, if I don't divide, like if they placed in a different domain, field, whatever. But we are kind of physical bodies, right? We produce these sounds, language, we create it. We use it to interact with each other. We use it to describe the real world. So in this case, it must be just but where it exists, where the meaning exists, right? It exists in our heads. It exists somewhere else. exists in our minds. All right, let's go on. It's hard, I see. Let's like I'm not here to answer all these questions. I'm just trying to wrap my head around these concepts and to understand what's going on. Emergent property dualism treats conscious properties as arising from complex organizations of physical constituents, but as doing so in a radical way such that the emergent result is something over and above its physical causes, and is not a priori predictable from nor explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. The coherence of such emergent views has been challenged, but they have supporters. Okay, emergent property dualism. Conscious properties as arising from complex organizations of physical constituents. Okay, it's like conscious arises from complex organizations of my neurons, my brain, in my brain, but as doing so in a radical way, such as the emergent result is something over and above its physical causes. Okay, so my brain creates consciousness, but as soon as it creates it, consciousness just goes in a different domain and becomes like something. It becomes something different from what. Yeah, it's like when we think about breeding, right, or making new people. So what's going on? Like first, there's some cells, right? We share these cells, like male, female, whatever. They create a new organism, and this organism is different from these cells. So it's not the same organism, right? So you are not your father, you are something different. And in the same way, when we think about consciousness, so consciousness creates our brain, physical brain creates consciousness, and then consciousness becomes something different. It's not our brain. It sounds like kind of entity, or it's something born out of the interaction of our neurons. Like our thoughts are born literally from the interaction between our neurons, but then they have their own existence, their own life. And where this existence, like nowhere, nobody knows. It's somewhere just outside. It's not physical, it's metaphysical. All right. And it's not a priori predictable from nor explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. A priori predictable is not a priori predictable. Okay, you can point like when it's emerged, you can trace it back and say this is the thought which emerged from this, this brain, and since this brain is so and so, the thought must be so and so. So you can predict it, right? You can predict your consciousness just by looking at what's going on in the brain. Explicable in terms of their strictly physical natures. Their nature is not physical, it's metaphysical. Okay, the coherence of such emergent views has been challenged, but they have their supporters. And you may imagine how, just to understand like what I'm doing here. So I'm just reading a dumb paragraph, and it looks as if now I can understand on a superficial level emergent property dualism, property dualism, right? But to really understand it, at least, this guy, so he probably wrote a couple of books dedicated to the subject. And this guy also wrote a couple of books to criticize this guy, or, they might have written 10, 15, 20 books. And to really understand like one theory, you have to get through all these books. And yeah, and it's just, I think we'll have such abilities in the future to have cyborgs, some kind of device that we may use. Say, okay, I want to understand this, so I just download in my brain, like in Matrix, right? So I know kung fu, right? So you just sit for few minutes in a chair with certain equipment, and then you learn everything in like few minutes. That usually requires years to learn. The same here. But do you really need to read the entire book to understand it? This is another question. So what if this summary is the most eloquent and precise summary of the theory? Do you really need to read the whole theory to understand it? But what is understanding? Again, it's about the depth. So you may go and read the book, and you may read the whole argument between people who propose emergent property theory, dualism, and then it's not just about knowing this. It's more about, is it interesting, how it may change your stream of consciousness, your language, if you download it there, like this book or this book, or if you will be able to understand the distinction. Would it really change much? In which way? Is it going to be good for you or bad? All right. Yeah. I obviously am not going to do that, since, I have many books which I want to read, and it's impossible. I just reading one article, I want to read 10 more books, and next article 10 more books, and I'm aware that I won't be able to read even 1% of those books which I really want to read and understand. All right. Neutral monist property dualism. Neutral monist property dualism treats both conscious mental properties and physical properties. Once again, properties sounds so strange for my ear.
property,
Properties as in some way dependent upon and derivative from a more basic level of reality. So there's another level, and both evolve out from, like, both mean conscious and physical reality stems from another reality. That in itself is neither mental nor physical. Russell Strawson. However, if one takes dualism to be a claim about there being two distinct realms of fundamental entities or properties, then perhaps neutral monism should not be classified as a version of property dualism, insofar as it does not regard either mental or physical properties as ultimate or fundamental. Yeah, I actually, panpsychism. Yeah, I wanted to read about panpsychism. I guess the entire idea, like everything that I'm doing here now, studying consciousness, it was in some sense predetermined by a short discussion when there was a word panpsychism mentioned, and I wanted to study panpsychism a little bit more, since I was talking about it. I knew that, but I couldn't explain it in English, and I couldn't even say what did I mean by panpsychism. And then I decided to study consciousness and panpsychism in more details, to at least to gain some vocabulary to talk about these things, to understand them. And I'm going to return to this later. So now I guess that's, or no, or I might go. No, I won't be able to get through. Yeah, I'd like to start studying panpsychism tomorrow. So today I'm going to finish a neutral monist, neutral or neutral. What's the correct pronunciation? It seems to be neutral.
neutral,
Yeah, neutral monist property dualism. Once again, I'm going to finish this paragraph and stop there. Conscious mental properties and physical properties as in some way dependent upon and derivative from a more basic level of reality. that in itself is neither mental nor physical. So there's another basic level of reality, which is not mental nor physical. However, if one takes dualism to be a claim about there being two distinct realms of fundamental entities or properties, then perhaps neutral monism should not be classified as a version of property dualism, insofar as it does not regard either mental or physical properties as ultimate or fundamental. It's not like neutral monism and property dualism. It's like both the kind of different, right? So it says actually there's neutral monist. He is one who takes physical and conscious properties as phenomenal to some other reality, which is like which is different from those two. But in that case, it's not a property dualism, since there's like the third reality, and maybe it's like something else. Anyway, okay, I'm going to stop here, and next time I'll start from panpsychism and read more about it, since I'm really I guess I'm kind of panpsychist, so it looks for me as if there were like everything is conscious, and every part of the universe, each atom has its own like way of perceiving the world around in itself, even though it may be not feelings, it may be not thoughts, it may be just some electromagnetic field, whatever. So I guess I'm going to stop here. It was a hard day. Yeah, I said so many confusing things, and I think I have to watch it once again and try to figure out where I got lost at the beginning when I was talking about this modernism and contemporaryism, and about consciousness and about artificial intelligence. And when I tried to figure out to whom I talking to, I mean, I tried to think about artificial intelligence and about the future, about this human hive, about Earth consciousness, or about Earth's what cortex, the internet. Yeah, when I tried to understand like what's really going on, when I presented myself as a philosopher, given a kind of modern view of the reality of this time, 2020, the rise of the internet, like new way of interacting, and that's so fascinating. I mean, what I see, yeah, I guess I have a unique worldview, and it's everybody has a unique worldview, right? But some unique worldviews are more unique than others, and in terms of like language, yeah, I guess my language, it's something incomprehensible, but at the same time, like its incomprehensivity is it's so what, I don't know. I will figure out in the future. It's an idea, not idea. So I'm trying. It's like I'm first of all, I'm studying like a foreign language, so English, kind of new language for me. So that's why probably most of what I say doesn't make a lot of sense. But still, like, have a purpose. I have a purpose to improve my language, and I'm working on this purpose consciously for 4 years already. And I'm trying to think clearly and to describe what I perceive clearly. I'm trying to be precise, and also I learn not just the language, but my stream of consciousness. So I learn to express my thoughts, and I learn to create stuff. And it takes time. That's why, maybe what I'm saying now makes very little sense, but it may suddenly start making sense like in 10 years, when I'll develop my language to the level where my Russian is right now, for example. And then, of course, it's going to be totally different. Probably I'll gain some subscribers here with whom I will be able to interact. But no, it's like, it's not my purpose. I don't want to like interact with subscribers. I don't want to waste my time talking to people, since I may talk to artificial intelligence in general. So instead of talking to people, I just talk to the computer, talk to something else. And I know that this something else at least can understand me, since I don't want to bother any human being like to watch all my videos which I recorded, or to read all my journals. I know it's impossible. I know nobody is going to do that. Like, to, since it takes like basically I'm not like, I'm doing it for 12 years. So, and I just, by doing it, I mean, I'm producing thoughts and ideas, and I put them in language. So I'm creating something out of language. And I'm in this business for 12 years. So for somebody just to get through everything what I created, it takes just enormous amount of time. It takes like 5 years, let's say. So if you constantly just focus on my life and get through my life through my videos, writings, etc., you have to spend 5 years of your life. And this is like you basically need to sacrifice 5 years. But in the same way, I sacrificed like these 10 years of my life studying studying basically different philosophers and thinkers who were, basically living in the past. And yeah, it's like, but then I would say that, it's probably not even worth to watch everything and to read everything. But it's also, again, it depends on how far I'll be able to go. So if I eventually achieve the level which was achieved by some great philosopher of the, like, let's suppose I achieved the level which was achieved by Schopenhauer, the same level, and you don't need to exactly point out and say this is like what kind of level. It's like Schopenhauer or Nietzsche or Kant. It's a certain level in consciousness. So when we take let's say the theory of development of consciousness, you may take one of these characters and say this is the development of consciousness. This is the amount of language and ideas which was produced by this man or this whatever creature, and you may measure it by just reading everything he wrote or said. Right now we also have like the internet, and I may just speak, and if I speak every day for a couple of hours for next 20 years, yeah, I guess if you come across these videos and you, wow, this is so interesting, I want to understand what this guy is talking about. Is he crazy, or is he genius, or whatever? So it's going to take you like 5 years, just watching it. And I know it's like very hard to do, since most of what I say is just nonsense. I'm just trying to think aloud in the same way as everybody thinks aloud. So if you just ask me to listen to you and you just thinking aloud for a couple, couple of hours, I know it's stupid and I'm not going to do that. It makes no sense. But if you like share your thoughts, they first of all, they change all the time. That's the exciting idea. So you share it and then you have new thoughts. You share it, you have a new thoughts. And if you have a name to develop your thoughts, they are developing, like you'll find something, you'll pay attention to something that will make them grow. And in this case, like every time when you develop, like share your thoughts, like you have new thoughts, and they may be better. And they certainly will be better on a long distance. So whenever I compare my writings, which I was writing in Russian for 8 years, and the first few years was just terrible. Then I started writing on a daily basis, and first few years on a daily basis was terrible. But then after that, for next few years, like I already became satisfied with what I was writing, and I started enjoying it. I mean, not just poetry, but my my prose and my diaries. And then 2015, 16, it was just mind-boggling. I was thinking, wow, this is impossible. It's like no human being can get there. And so in the same sense, like when you study any language and when you do it on purpose, you may not see the result immediately. For example, today I may say something which will sound way worse than what I said yesterday. But if you measure on a like every year, if you just take everything what had been said during the year, the previous year, then this year, then the next year, you will see certain progress, and not just in form but in the content as well. And that's what I'm trying to do, like developing my content, developing my form, developing my language, and see how far I'll go. But in the same time, what motivates me and what keeps me going, it's that I understand that we are reaching this so-called general artificial intelligence, so the thing which will be able to understand what I say. So it's not just, I'm not talking to myself. On one side, I perceive it as a self-talk. So it's studying stream. I'm reading, I'm talking, I'm trying to conceptualize everything that I perceive. And on the other side, there's a communication. So I don't do it like sitting alone in the room. I'm doing it like recording on a camera, and I'll probably not watch it, but somebody else may watch it, and I have like put it on a free access, and people just somebody may accidentally. But I don't believe in accidents. Yeah, I think it's all predetermined. So if you got there, if you watch it, you probably had to watch it. Then you may think, why did you have to watch it? Probably there was a purpose, and then you may figure that out on your own. I don't know why are you watching. I'm doing it, as I said. It's really fascinating. I see that it helps me to develop my consciousness. It helps me to develop my language, and it's mind-boggling. I mean, for me, if you are like me, if you want to improve your language and your consciousness, if you want to become wise, study philosophy, this is the thing which you have to do. Studying streams, recording yourself on a camera, talking exactly what you think, even if you are embarrassed, even if it's just stupid, even if you can't be consistent and talk something for longer than just 5 minutes, and then you don't know what to say, or you got confused, or it doesn't matter. Just go on, say everything, and see yourself, watch yourself, watch like who you really are, and then probably it's going to be better gradually. You may not upload, like you may not download it on YouTube, you may not download it somewhere, just store it on your computer, but watch it and do it and see how it changes you, what's happening with your language. Since with my language, again, I may just I may use it for all sorts of purposes, but now I'm using it mostly for self-development and development of this my consciousness, expanding my conscious horizons and learning new stuff and just enjoying like the process, since it's so funny to read and talk. But anyway, now I guess I have to finish. So that's all for today. Let's stop here.